welcome to another episode of Homegrown, a show all about gardening here in Newfoundland and Labrador. On this week's show, we're going to operate out of Memorial University's Botanical Garden. We'll begin with a practical demonstration on how to make an alpine trough with Tim Walsh. He'll show us how to create a simple but attractive addition to anybody's garden. I'll give you a tour of the beautiful rock garden here at MUN, and rock gardens are tailor-made for Newfoundland conditions. Dr. Peggy Dixon will talk about an animal. It's not really an insect, but it's one that we all seem to hate, and that's the spider. She believes they get a bad rap. And Debbie Preston has insect advice for novice gardener Tim Murray. It seems he can also use some advice on how to deal with problems in his onion patch. So stay tuned for a full half hour of information and fun. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I love rock gardens. They are beautiful gardens in the springtime. But some of them are actually quite big and they might take a lot of work. But here we've got tiny little rock gardens. They are beautiful. Look at these small little alpines in these troughs. This is an alpine trough, a type of container that we have at MUN Botanical Garden, but you can make these too. And the real specialist on this is Tim Walsh, our nurseryman. Hi Tim, how you doing?
Hi Will, thanks. Fine, and you?
I'm doing fine, and well, tell us how to make one of these. What's it made of anyway?
Nothing to it, it's just a mixture of sand and peat here and some basic cement.
Cement, and what sort of proportions?
Oh, equal proportions of each, and we mix it up into a sort of a very sort of pliable type mixture here.
All right. Oh, it's like, ooh, yeah, you can really do stuff with this,
That's
like
right.
Sculpture clay.
Sort of just like making a pie.
All right, and then what do you put it in?
Simply into just a box, any sort of box at all, whatever sort of size that you would like, as long as it's not too big, because if it gets too big, it'll flop over.
This is extremely expensive.
Not at all. Very cheap. A lot of this stuff is just kicking around your house, maybe not the cement, but cement's pretty cheap anyways.
Right, and so you just pack it in there.
Yeah, I'll show you.
All right.
So I've already mixed this stuff up equal portions,
yeah,
and just enough moisture in there so that we can form it and it doesn't fall apart. If it's too wet, it'll just fall down onto itself. So we just throw it into the box
and pack
then just simply pack it around, holding the outside of the box so that the box doesn't get weakened the more we pack it in there.
Sure.
And just pack it in there nicely so that there's about 1 inch all the way around.
Yeah.
Tapered on the inside of the corners, and that'll give it some extra strength.
And then you put that aside for what, 24 hours?
About 48 hours. Put the whole thing inside of a plastic bag because that keeps the moisture in there. I'm wearing the rubber glove here because cement is very toxic or corrosive, so it helps to protect your hands that way.
Very good. And so you end up with something like this.
Exactly. It'll come out like that.
Yeah, but that doesn't look like this beautiful one here.
No.
What do you do?
We have to rough it up a little bit. You have to really get in there.
You rough it up?
Exactly, rough it up. Work out your frustrations on this thing.
Okay, and what do you do with it? How do you rough it up?
Just with a wire brush or a chisel or an old screwdriver or something like that, because what we're trying to do is create a sort of eroded, more natural look. This one looks kind of square and kind of unnatural, where this one here is a lot more rounded. It looks like it may have been outlined in the fields for years.
Yeah, oh, it looks fabulous. See, you got a hole in the middle for drainage.
Exactly,
and
that's just poked in when we make the form. Just with your finger, the last thing you do,
yeah,
poke a hole in there. and just wrap it up in that plastic as I mentioned and leave it.
Okay, so we've got the container now, but how do we go from a container to this beautiful little alpine garden? What mix do you use? How do you plant it up?
Well, we use an alpine mix, and the benefit, of course, of the alpine mix is that the soil is nice and well drained.
Right.
So it has to be any mix that has a little bit of organics in it, and I've got some there.
All right.
Usually a topsoil base with some sand mixed in there.
Yeah.
And a little bit of organic matter in the form of leaf mold or compost or any sort of organic matter at all will do.
Okay.
And just mix that up so that, again, you have to make sure that it's well drained because those plants that we're going to use really like that drainage.
And I suppose the plants that you put in here are not going to be real fast-growing, large plants.
Not at all. Alpine plants generally are relatively slow-growing.
Yeah.
And they have fairly shallow root systems in some cases. So obviously that's why they lend themselves well to this type of container because, as you see, you've only got a few inches there.
Right. And what I really like the effect here with the gravel over the top. Now this is just a clay pot, but that looks really effective.
Mm-hmm. That's just a regular 3/8 grit that we lay on the top there, and it gives it a little bit of a natural look. It's kind of like how you would envision the plant if it was growing out in the wild. And it also gives a little bit of protection against moisture evaporation from the soil as well.
Okay, well let's look over here now. We've got, this has been planted a while, and then you've made it really effective with the use of rocks as well. So that's,
Well, rocks, of course, lend themselves really well to alpine situations. Newfoundland, we have plenty of rocks, so that's not a problem. And I like to find some that have lichens already growing on there because one of the things that we like to do with these troughs is to give it that aged look. Because again, those alpine areas are really rugged, and we often find lichens growing on rocks in those situations.
And do we have to take this in the winter?
No, not at all. But we do have to take it down off the deck if we're keeping it up on our deck and put it somewhere in the corner of the yard where we think it's going to get lots of snow cover and that'll protect it for the winter.
So if it's not, then it's not a bad idea to actually shovel a bit of snow over the top.
Exactly, or even some leaves in the fall, pack the leaves in and around it just to give it that little bit of extra insulation.
Wow. This has been great, Tim. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Wow, this looks like a project that even I can take on. Wow, so nice. We're going to be right back. Welcome back. It's a little windy today, but really wind, that is one of the characteristics of being on top of a mountain, and we are in an alpine garden or rock garden where most of the plants in here are plants that are used to being fully exposed, usually near mountain tops. And so Newfoundland, Labrador is a perfect place to think about doing some rock gardening. What is a rock garden? Well, a rock garden is not a bunch of soil with a few rocks plonked on top. A rock garden really is a whole area of rocks with soil in crevices, and we grow the plants in those crevices. And we have to think about what sorts of plants to grow. And we look at the plants that are regularly found up on mountain tops all over the world. And today I'm surrounded by beautiful alpine plants like this beautiful, this is a thyme, this is a creeping thyme, and it's wonderful. I'm going to put some on my salad tonight. Here's a dianthus from Europe. It's one of the pinks, very close relative of the carnations. And look at this, it's a nice tussocky plant. In fact, if you look at these plants, you'll see them all low, tussocky type of plants, because that is the sort of characteristics of alpine plants. Because why would you put your head way up if you're sitting on top of a mountain? Most alpines like pretty minimal soil. They grow in sort of peaty soil with a lot of grit in there. They don't have big well-drained, deep, organic soils, because that's not what you find up on mountain tops. If you put some of these alpines into deep, rich soil, they grow tall, they fall over, and they're not half as hardy as they would be if they're in more minimal soil. So this entire garden, and it's looking pretty darn good, is not fertilized. We hardly give it any fertilizer whatsoever. We hardly water it. Because I don't know about you, but I've not seen anybody on top of a mountain with a bag of 20-20-20 or a watering can. And the plants get on very well up there by themselves. So if you've got a rock garden, don't think in terms of giving it too much fertilizer and too much water. Well, how does it hold on to the water? Well, many of the plants are extremely good at conserving water. And what we've done in here is we've actually put down a mulch, and a mulch of stones. And underneath this stone is a peaty, gritty soil. Not much of a soil at all. And then we cover it with mulch of stones, and that cuts down on water loss from the soil. It cuts down on light hitting the soil, so there's not so much weeding going on. And it really gives it an aesthetic look that is representative of an alpine garden. So if you're starting off for an alpine garden, think in terms of getting some good, well-weathered rocks. These have been here for a while. We've got some lichen on here, and then try and put the rocks in a situation that makes it look reasonably naturalistic. Don't put them all up on end or anything like that. And then try, if there is any striations in the rock, try and make them look like they're in a natural setting. You put the rocks close, put little bits of soil in between the rocks, and then pick and choose your plants, maybe from a fine nursery. Go and ask for alpine plants or rock garden plants especially, and then put those in the crevices, stand back, maybe mulch them with a little bit of gravel, and let nature take its course. Don't give it a great deal of water, don't give it a great deal of food, and think about where you put this rock garden. I don't know about you, but there's not many trees I've seen on tops of mountains. Rock gardens like sunshine, so put them out in the exposed area where they get lots of sunshine and not much else, and you should have a trouble-free garden. It'll take a couple of years to get going. But once you get a rock garden in good condition, really the maintenance actually goes very low indeed. We do a little bit of weeding, not much. Other than that, we leave it alone. So we'll be right back. You know, spiders can be pretty frightening, but most Newfoundland spiders are way more help than they are a hindrance. Dr. Peggy Dixon is here to answer a viewer's question about spiders.
There seems to be a lot of spiders in my garden. Are they good or bad for the garden?
Well, thanks for asking that, Vanessa. I'm really glad you did, because spiders get a very bad rap. A lot of people are afraid of them thanks to Hollywood movies and fear of things like black widows and so on. And in fact, they're one of the most beneficial animals that we have in the garden. In the province, we don't have any poisonous spiders, they don't bite, and we don't have anything like black widows. All the ones that we have are totally beneficial, and the ones that you most likely see in your garden are the ones you'd be familiar with are the big orb weavers. They make the huge webs, and they catch all kinds of flying and crawling insects in those webs, from wasps to small things. Some of them are beneficial insects, unfortunately, but they do catch a lot of pests as well. Another type of spider that you probably won't be as familiar with are wolf spiders, and they don't make webs at all. They actually just run along the ground and they hunt their prey, but they're totally beneficial as well, and they actually kill a lot of pests. There are also some spiders that get into your house, sort of have the same types of behaviors. One makes webs, the house spider it's called, and you often, I'm sure most people are familiar with it in corners in their basement or in closets, or you can see the cobwebs and so on. Again, they are actually beneficial in your house. They are eating and catching and eating other insects and so on. And there's another type of spider in your house called a jumping spider, which, like the wolf spider outside, is actually a hunter. It doesn't make a web. You can sometimes catch them out of the corner of your eye if you're sitting watching TV. You'll see some little black thing walking across the ceiling or across the wall. It's probably a jumping spider hunting prey. So to conclude, really spiders are beneficial, and I know people are afraid of them. There's really no reason to be. They don't bite and they're not poisonous. They don't sting. They're just totally beneficial predators.
Hi, and welcome back to the Vegetable Patch. We're here with Tim Murray, and we're just going to check in on your garden. How are things going?
Everything's good. I guess the problem that we'll talk about today is just the overcrowding in the garden.
I can see you've got a row of zucchini and some beets and things that we're going to have a look at today.
Yeah.
This lovely crop of zucchini starting to develop, but you must really like zucchini. They're planted a foot apart, just a little over a foot apart. A little close. Bush varieties of squash and zucchini, 4 to 6 feet if you can, to get them to develop. Some of the pumpkins and the squash can go up to 8 feet, depending on the variety of plant. So these are a little close. You're going to have a lot of room for all these fruit to develop in here. Now, if you want to make pickles out of them, there's some here just ready to harvest now.
Okay.
That'll give you some room. Maybe taking some of the weeds that are starting to develop out again.
Sure.
Getting some weeding done, and you might need just take out a couple of plants that are really close together.
Take out the rather larger ones.
Yeah.
Of the group.
Well, the plants are ready. You can take out some of the plants, but some of the fruit are ready to harvest. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, especially if you want to make stir fry or something like that, you can do that now. Pickles be a nice size to make.
Sure.
Pickles out of, and just let the smaller ones develop, and like I said, keep the weeds out of them and give them as much room as you can.
Okay.
And let's have a look at the beets and see how they're doing. And you're finding that they're a bit tight as well?
Yeah, I find these are probably the tightest of the crops.
Yeah.
We did them from seed, and I guess we probably didn't space them as best we could have.
Right. Well, when you're dropping in seed, you're just dropping it in with your fingers, which is a natural way of doing it. Once the seed starts coming up and germinating, you can actually harvest the tops for salads.
Okay.
Eat the beet leaves. It's getting a little late now, and you want to space it out. When you harvest those leaves, you just go through, you leave one good plant, and you take everything in between for about 2 inches, and then leave the next good plant.
Sure.
So you can still do it now. You still got time to get that done, but it's getting a bit late. You can see some of these beets have started to develop, and they're going quite close together. That one is twisted around another one here. And we take that one out. We leave this nice one here that's developed. This one that's really next to it, we're going to have to take it out. So we leave a nice beet plant there and some room for it to grow. And
Sure. And I guess the ones we can take out, we can still use for salad.
yes, you can still use the tops.
Sure.
Yeah. And eat with all that extra lettuce you have. And you're just going to have to go down through the row. And every couple of inches, leave a nice, good, healthy plant to develop. Oh, there's a big one in there, but there's 3 crowded in next to it. Give it some room to grow. There you go. Once you do that, you want to be careful not to damage the ones that you leave behind, not to disturb the root around them. And if you can, give it a little bit of a drink. It's really, really dry here. There's not a lot of rain so far. So if you go right down through the row, that'll probably take you about a half hour or so.
Okay, not too much maintenance.
No. You just get your weeding done and your watering for that week, and then next week we'll check into the garden again.
Sure.
Okay, so join us next week and we'll see what else is happening in Tim's garden. Thank you very much.
Well, certainly Tim has some problems with his onions, but the rest of the vegetable garden is looking pretty good. Hi, here's a tip. If you're going to be seeding, make sure the seed is planted in really fine mix and you want the seed in very close contact with the soil. I'm going to plant up some seeds right now and I'll show you what I mean. Here's a really nice fine mix, a lot of peat in there, and what I'm going to do is make sure that the seed bed is nicely compact. So I'm pressing it down with the bottom of another pot, okay? Then I'm going to take my seed and I'm going to sprinkle it nice and evenly over the surface of the soil, and then I'm going to add just a little bit more seed. I'm just going to add a little bit more mix. And then I'm going to press that down too, and that makes the seed in very close contact with the soil. One of the things that sometimes happens with seed is it comes up out of the ground and then it damps off because of the humidity. One way of getting around the humidity is to get some gravel from an aquarium shop, or you can actually use this stuff which is called vermiculite, and sprinkle about 1/4 to 1/2 inch of vermiculite over the surface of the mix. Then, when the seedlings come up, they're going to come through the vermiculite into a much drier atmosphere than if they were just on top of soil. So, we've seeded it, we've pressed it on, we've then put some vermiculite on top, and then it's coming to watering. And with watering, make sure you don't wash all the seed out of the soil when you start watering. So you have a fine rose, and then you just water nice and gently, so you're not washing the seed out. You've seeded successfully. Make sure you label it so you know what to expect when it comes up, and you're away to the races. There's just a little tip. On next week's show, we're going to deal with a topic that's becoming more and more popular, and that's landscape design and construction. Designer Pam Pippi will give us a tour of her own garden, and she'll throw out some ideas for those of us who want to change or develop our own backyard plot. Then we head out to Portugal Cove to visit with Dave Carew. His company collects rocks from 5 different quarries in Newfoundland and Labrador, and he provides a beautiful array of stone for the adventurous gardener. Dr. Peggy Dixon will entertain a question from one of our viewers about that awful thing called the cinch bug. Anybody who has a lawn should tune in to hear what she has to say. And Debbie and Tim are back to talk about potatoes. Tim's potatoes are coming along well, but there are a few things he'll have to look out for. Well, before we go, I'd like to thank some of the people that helped us put this show together. Certainly, Landscape Newfoundland and Labrador, our non-profit trade association, were instrumental in getting Homegrown going. And so was the Agricultural Policy Framework. So thanks to them, thanks to you for watching, and we'll see you next week.